Hi, this is Adam Gussow, and you're listening to the 25th Hour radio show with Rob and Randy.
The 25th Hour radio show.
Adam, when did you first decide to find the legendary Crossroads and trade your soul for the ability to play blues harmonica like no other?
Well, I have to say something. I teach the blues down here at Ole Miss, and one thing I make a point of saying is don't believe anybody who gives you any of that hype about the Crossroads. So I do have a Crossroads around here that I occasionally go down to, but I certainly haven't traded my soul to anybody. I worked hard. It's about sweat. That's what people don't understand. Here's what I can tell you, is that to the extent that my own life had a personal crossroads, it took place in late October of 1986 when I was working for $6 an hour as a tutor in a community college in the South Bronx, and I was trying to find my way through Harlem to get to the South Bronx, and I was on 125th Street. I had passed the Apollo Theater, and on my right was a gentleman playing. He was a street musician, and he was playing guitar, playing one little hi-hat cymbal, but playing incredible guitar. And I got out of my car. I was a little nervous. I hadn't really spent any time on the streets in Harlem. I got out of my car, and I stood looking at the guy, and I finally turned to somebody, and I said, "Who's that? What's the guitar man's name?" And they said, "Well, that's Satan." Everybody in Harlem knows Satan. And I thought, well, Adam, you've met the guy you're supposed to play with, and then we can say that Adam played with Satan. So I came back the next day and I sat in with him on harmonica, and we're still playing together 25 years down the line, 26 years.
What made you choose the harmonica over other instruments?
I made a conscious decision. I was just the nerd in high school who didn't have a girlfriend and said, "I love the harmonica. I'm going to do something that nobody in this school thinks I have it in me to do. I'm going to go out and get a harmonica and learn how to play Whammer Jammer by the J. Giles Band," which is what everybody was listening to back in the mid-'70s. And I went out and got a harmonica and learned how to play Whammer Jammer badly, but enough that I didn't get a girl from it, but people paid attention.
Are you saying harmonica players don't get the girls like guitar players?
No, I finally did. That all much later. I married a beautiful woman many, many, many years later. But no, back then, I just knew that I was going to teach myself how to play. So I got a guitar and a harmonica pretty much at the same time. I was as much into Clapton as I was into the J. Giles Band and Sonny Terry and Paul Butterfield. I was an electric blues player in my own head. I was like that kid in Crossroads. I was the guy who's in his own head. He is going to take on the world. Yeah.
What was it like touring with legendary blues players like Bo Diddley and Buddy Guy?
We didn't tour with Buddy Guy, but Bo Diddley, that was quite a trip. Because I have to take you back a little bit. As late as the fall of 1990, Sterling McGee, Mr. Satan, and I were still working little hellholes in New York. We were working basically what we will politely call a women's bar in Greenwich Village, and playing weddings for women. I mean, it was a kind of a weird scene where a guy like me who was single just felt kind of depressed because I knew I wasn't going to get a woman in that bar. And our agent came in, a woman who loved us came in. So you never know. I've learned that you never know who's going to walk through the door. It may seem like this is not going to be your day. This is not your gig. A woman walks through the door. She says, "I love what you do. Please call me." She managed Bo Diddley, the Wilson Pickett, the Village People. She booked Chuck Berry, and she said, I love what you guys do. I'm going to manage you if you'll let me. And we said, sure. Next thing we know, we're on the bus with Bo touring the United Kingdom. Bo Diddley was exactly like you expect he'll be. He was no nonsense. He had no attitude except he was a tough guy. He'd been a former sheriff, I think, out in New Mexico, and he just loved what he did. He would curse Sterling did not curse, and so there was a sort of little tension with that. Mr. Satan did not like it when people cursed.
Yeah, that's odd.
Isn't that funny?
Mr. Satan.
But it was great. It was great. I mean, you know, he's a real guy, as most of these people are behind the scenes. You don't know what you're going to get. He was a real guy.
Now let's talk about your buddy, Mr. Satan Sterling. How did you
Sure.
first get introduced to him initially?
Well, honestly, it was that first day when I saw him play, I asked who he was. People said, "That's Mr. Satan." That's Satan. And I said, "Could I sit in with him if I brought my stuff back?" They said, "Sure." So the next day, basically, I came back. It was like same bad time, same bad channel. It's exactly the same scene. There's people all around him watching him in Harlem. And I went up to him on a break, and I was terrified. I had played with a lot of guitar players over in Europe. I'd been a street musician on and off for a year and a half in New York, but he scared the hell out of me because he was so good, and because I thought he would just laugh at me and say, "Go home," you know. And I shook his hand, and we played. I knew his name. He did not know my name. We played the first song, and a whole bunch of people threw money in his hat when it was over and seemed to enjoy my presence with him. And so he asked me through the PA, basically said, "So your name is what?" And I said, "Adam." And he looked and he sort of smiled at everybody. He said, and I guess they told you what my name is. And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "My name is Satan," like that, shouting it. And people just thought that was hysterical. They loved him. So that's how I met him. He introduced himself to me in public on the street like that.
Now, you guys played forever, right, on the streets of Harlem?
We played from, I'll tell you how it worked. 1986, we played through 87 when U2 came by. We were in Rattle and Hum for about less than a minute. Maybe people have seen that. We were in Rattle and Hum. We played straight through about 1990, opened for Buddy Guy in Central Park, which was our first big gig at a place called Summer Stage. And played till about 91 when we started to go off on tour. And then what happened is Mayor Giuliani came in, and he cleared all the street musicians, and all the street peddlers, period, off of 125th Street. That was part of his cleaning up the city project, but, you know, it was like criminals, guys who wash car windows, and street musicians all suffered this exactly the same way, and people who sold, you know, street kebab on the street, they were all moved down, and we just basically gave it up at that point.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
When you were featured on U2's Rattle and Hum, the rockumentary, as I like to call it, was that a surprise for them to walk up, or was that had been prearranged?
No, totally not prearranged. And the truth is, it all took place so fast. It was really not much longer than what you see on screen. It was about 2 minutes altogether. These guys come up. I didn't recognize them. I was barely watching. I was just playing. And when they left, somebody said, "You know who that was?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, that was U2." And I said, "Aren't they a rock group?" I mean, that's the level of my knowledge of that music of that type. And so we took a card. Somebody connected with us, took their card and worked out a deal. We got nothing for the recording. We got a little bit of money for being in the movie. Not nearly as much as I think they sold 12 million copies of Rattle and Hum.
Yeah, that was a big one.
We made $1,000 each. We got a buyout. We were totally. I don't want to talk any more about it, but we made nothing.
Now you were playing a song. Was it called Freedom?
Freedom for My People. That's right.
Now, who was the originator of that song?
Well, that's Sterling. Sterling wrote that. And when I say write, he actually, you know, you think blues guys don't write lyrics down, but some do, and he might have written those lyrics down. I transcribed them and put them in my book. But that's his song. It's his beautiful original song.
Hey, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your yearly harmonica retreat you got called Hill Country Harmonica?
You know something? We've done it 3 years in a row. We're not actually doing it this year. We're going to come back in 2014. But we've done, basically it was an attempt to do something that was pure blues harmonica that was in Mississippi. There aren't any festivals that are just blues harmonica festivals that are in Mississippi, and we thought that's crazy. I live in the Hill Country, which is not to be confused with the Delta. In fact, I'm speaking to you from my office on the campus of the University of Mississippi, which is about 60 miles from Clarksdale. We're 60 miles east, so the Delta is just to the west of the hills. And we thought it would be a good idea to just bring people down. It's a lot of work producing an annual festival, which is why we're taking a break. But I thought it was important to feature Southern artists, African-American artists, people who fly a little under the radar, guys like Charlie Sales, Dr. Feelgood Potts. We've had some interesting characters and great players. Billy Branch, Sugar Blue, Jason Ritchie. So we've had just a lot more players than that. Todd Parrott and Jimmy Lee, and guys you might have heard of, guys you might not have heard of. So it's been a great experience, a great teaching experience. The thing that made it important, it was a combination of kind of like a private festival and a weekend teaching retreat. So we had 120 people maybe the first year, 150 or 60 the second, maybe 125, 30 the third year. And people come in, and it's all crazy blues harmonica players, and it's very liberating.
So is there
I think.
Is there a limit on how many people can come, or?
Well, no. I mean, that's how many signed up. I think we thought about it. If we had done it this year, we might have had to put a limit on it. I think the natural capacity is not much more than about 170, 80 maybe. It all takes place. What makes it unique is that there's free camping or very low-cost camping on site, and then all the teaching and the performances take place outdoors, basically in the summertime or late spring. It's third week of May, so it can be really warm, and it produces a kind of togetherness. It's underneath a gazebo and underneath these sort of tent things, and that's part of what makes it special.
So it's got kind of a Woodstock vibe to it.
It definitely has a little bit of a mini Woodstock vibe. Yeah. We joked about calling it Harpstock, actually.
Do you keep in contact with a lot of these people that come?
Well,
let me rephrase that. Do you make new friends at this?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and certainly it was really about letting the harmonica players make friends with each other. There's no question that it produced a really tight-knit community.
Has anybody ever got up there just to show you what they've learned and just blown you away?
There's always that kind of thing. Oh yeah, and sometimes young people too. We had a young Russian guy named Alex Paklin, who is one of these breed of, under 20, like crazy good, overblowing monsters. He was in from Russia, and so we've had some incredible conjunctions. I mean, like a row of 8 or 9 pros that trading off one chorus after another, acoustic harp, no amps helping the sound, just you and the mic. And I'll tell you, everybody raises their game. We have a couple of videos that people can find on YouTube.
Well, let me ask you this.
Sure.
Does anybody ever cut heads?
Oh yeah. I mean, they're all good. They certainly cut heads. And they're all trying to blow each other off the stage, and that produces really good stuff.
Do you still?
One more name I should have mentioned, Mitch Kazmar. I mean, he's of all the guys who come up and play. I mean, we know that Jason Ritchie and Sugar Blue are going to be crazy good, crazy fast, but Mitch Kazmar is the guy that I hadn't seen, and I think he's up there with the absolute best who are out there right now. The Rod Piazzas and Rick Estrins and Kim Wilsons. Mitch Kazmar he's right up in that elite category, and he sings like a god too. So.
Do you still play on the street as much as you used to?
No, I wish number one, I'm Professor Gussow here in this little town of Oxford, so I don't do it much. I play at a few different festivals around town. But no, I don't. What I play is I play at the Juke Joint Festival in Clarksdale. Sterling and I never get a chance to play because I'm in Mississippi and he's down in Tampa. We're 700 miles apart. But I have a guitar player that I work with here, and every once in a while we get to go out on the street and do something. But no, it's a rare thing for me.
So does Professor Gussow, does he get his harp out in the middle of class?
I do I teach a class, in fact, I just taught a class last fall in the blues tradition in American literature. And one thing I did, which I hadn't really ever done in the 12 years I've been teaching, is I brought a couple of local blues guys in, guitar players. And that made an incredible difference in the class. So I pull out a harp every now and then, but just to demonstrate a concept or two. But basically, we're not talking about things where that's particularly relevant. So the answer is there's sort of two different sides of my life. Although I have to say one thing. Now I'm going to tell your listeners that I have just started a 12-part series that's on YouTube, 2 one-hour videos a week called Blues Talk, in which for the first time, instead of teaching people how to play harmonica, I'm really taking them through the blues tradition and talking about the culture, the literature, the social history of the blues in a much more like I might do as a professor, except that I'm sitting in the front seat of my car, which is hardly the way that they encourage us to teach here at Ole Miss. So I'm being I've found a voice that's halfway between a college professor and a blues guy sitting in the front seat of his car, and I think it's working well. So I'd ask your listeners to search it out.
Yeah, you do a ton of YouTube harmonica instructionals from the front seat of your car. Has there ever been an instance where someone has walked by and say, "Hey, who are you talking to?"
Once, and a lot of people used to joke about that. Once, very near the beginning of the whole thing, back in February, back in 2007, I was sitting at a little crossroads around here, and a Mississippi State Trooper, pulled up. And I cut that part out of the video, but there's sort of a before and after where I basically had to say, this is why I'm talking to myself in the front seat of my car. I'm okay. There's nothing wrong here. So yes, that has happened. And actually more than once I've started to do something in my car, and then, a bunch of laborers will come up and start to put salt hay on the ground or near me, and I realize it looks weird, so I have to go and find somewhere else to do this. But I like the natural.
Yeah, I was thinking there was probably be a lot of outtakes that you could do, videos of outtakes from the front seat of your car.
I've thrown them all away. I probably could have.
Well, what do you consider some of your hallmark achievements so far in your career?
I think, it's funny, in some ways, here's one thing I'd say. I'm one of the guys who I think has helped kick a younger generation of players who are around now, guys in their teens and 20s, in the direction of modernizing the blues sound. I'm one of the very first guys who took what Howard Levy was doing in a jazz way on the harmonica, using overblows, using those extra notes that you can get in the middle register of the harp, and using them in a blues way. There was really, back in the late 80s, there were only a couple of people doing that. And Carlos Del Junco was one of them. He and I used to basically say, why is nobody else interested in this? Why are no other blues players interested in these things? I think that's all changed. I think Jason Ritchie, he's basically the second coming. He's the guy who really put this out there in a huge way. But that's my historical role. When people look back 100 years from now, 50 years, if anybody remembers who I am, that'll be one of the things I think, is they'll say he helped modernize it. And the other's probably the teaching on YouTube. I think in some way I've become one of the more famous harmonica teachers in the world, simply because I came to YouTube pretty early in 2007, and then just put a whole lot of stuff out there. And that helped encourage other, at that point, really only Ronnie Shellist was out there doing things, and he hadn't done a lot. There were no other teachers who had been pros putting stuff out, and they all came after. And I'm happy that they did that. I think now there's a whole lot of information. I think if you're a young guy, I'm constantly hearing young players who are getting very good much more quickly than guys of my generation got good, because there's so much more information out there for them. So,
well, let's talk about your website real quick, Modern Blues
Sure.
Harmonica. What can our listeners expect by visiting that site? What can they get out of that?
Well, there's a number of things they can get out of it. One is I have a whole storehouse of videos and hand worked up tab sheets that I've been using for many years that are focused towards everything from beginners on through people who want to do overblows or learn overblows. So beginners through what I'd call advanced intermediates. So somebody who wants to learn how to play can come there, and they can find a whole long string of 60, 70 videos, kind of in order of increasing difficulty. There's also a forum. I have the most popular, I think next to Harp L, maybe it's more popular than Harp L, the most popular blues harmonica forum. So if somebody wants to find a group of players, experienced players, beginners, all ranges, who they can talk to and ask questions, they'll find that. There's I've got a page that has sort of top 10 and second 10 lists of who I feel are the most important harmonica players in the world. So, and I basically said, suppose there were a 14, 15-year-old kid who said, I love this harp thing. I want to be the greatest blues harmonica player who ever lived. I said, and he said, and suppose this player said, I want to know who the best are. Who do I need to take into account? Who have been the best historically? Well, it's pretty easy to come up with a top 5. Most people would say Little Walter, Big Walter, Sonny Boy 2, Rice Miller, right? Mm-hmm. Sonny Terry, and I can't remember the fifth. But that's, there's some names that are sort of easy to put down. And then it gets trickier. And I did my best to kind of come up with some lists and then a long list of honorable mention. And I think that you'll find 95% of the greatest living and dead players, living and historical players, you'll find them on that page.
Do you teach people directly?
I don't. You mean like Skype lessons or personal lessons? What
Absolutely.
I do is I say, if I don't do Skype, my other career and takes too much time. I'm not a full-timer that way. And I need some practice time. But what I do is if people are coming through Oxford, if they're taking a vacation from Memphis down through New Orleans, I'm completely open to making space for an occasional private lesson. So certainly anybody passing through Mississippi or Memphis, and I'm 80 miles south of Memphis, it's pretty easy to find me. So I do that.
What about your latest album you put out? Was it last year or the year before, your Southbound album?
Southbound, yeah. I think it really came out kind of the end of 2011. So it's a little more than a year old. Southbound was really an attempt to expand on what I was trying to do in my first solo album, Kick and Stomp, which was, Kick and Stomp was a one-man band thing, and I still do a lot of that. What I did with Southbound is I recorded a bunch of stuff as a one-man band, and then I said, okay, if I wanted to add something to this, what could I add that would help? And I played rhythm guitar on a number of tracks. I added bass, 3 different bass players on tracks, used keyboards on a couple of tracks, and then did a few things that were not one-man band, but that were just a little different. So it was a kind of the one-man big band, you could say, that sound. And it gives an unusual sound. So there's no drums really, except on maybe 2 cuts.
Now, whose idea was it to put out the video for Crossroads?
That was my good friend, the guy who engineered and co-produced my 2 solo albums. We were looking around, and he was just getting into video production, and so we said, "What song would be the obvious one to do?" And we said, "Well, hell, let's try this." So we got a camera and literally drove down to the Delta without a shooting script on a fall afternoon and said, what looks cool? And got footage. And when we came to that place that sort of was a crossroads, I just said, my God, it looks like everybody's imagination of what the crossroads would look like. There was a railroad tracks kind of crossing, literally a railroad tracks running next to a crossroad. And I said, that's fantastic. Let's just do everything we can think of. And that became the location for most of what we did. So that was Brian Ward. His name is Brian W. Ward.
Well, Adam, we really appreciate you stopping by and talking to us today. We hope you enjoyed your time here with us. And everybody out there listening, you need to check out Adam by going to his YouTube channel, Kudzu Runner, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you can, if you go to Google and put in the words Modern Blues Harmonica, you'll find my website and you'll find the YouTube site.
That makes it a lot easier.
So they're all there. Yeah.
So, Adam, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thanks a lot, guys. My pleasure.
The 25th Hour Radio Show.